Oh, here we go again.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. It's your brother Leafy was here, and in today's video I had a debate with someone by the name of Brethren of Purity. Now the main theme of the discussion was the reliability of Sunni Hadith versus Shia Hadith, and he's coming at this from the perspective of the Orientalists using their methodology influenced by their thinking, and he's trying to apply that to scrutinize the Sunni Hadith corpus. Now, my interlocutor himself, for those of you who don't know, is a Shia mutafalsif, a Shia philosopher who believes in things like substance monism, or what's known as wahdatul wujud, and Neoplatonic philosophies, Aristotelian metaphysics, which from our perspective as Sunni traditionalists, we believe are absolute kufr. But because that wasn't the main theme of the discussion, he specifically asked me to discuss the reliability of the Sunni traditional narrative or the Sunni Hadith corpus. That's what I wanted to instead focus the discussion on. Now, when it came down to it, I was able to provide him a series of data points that I believe supported the Sunni traditional position, whereas he was unable to provide or prove the reliability of the Shia narrative as opposed to the Sunni narrative. At one point, he even asked me saying, well, what does the Sunni Hadith have that the Shia Hadith doesn't have? And I said, look, well, we didn't steal your Hadiths and embellish them for theological reasons and give fabricated change and back project them onto venerated figures. Whereas you guys did. You did that with our Hadith. And I gave him examples from Kara's work. He then started coping by saying that Kara's work actually isn't doing isnad kun matan analysis, and that Kara's critiques of the Shia Hadith that I presented are actually incorrect, which I think is obviously absurd. But yeah, with that all being said, it was a respectful conversation, which I always appreciate and applaud, and he's more than welcome to come back on and discuss other issues and topics with me at any time of his choosing. With that being said, if you guys want to support the da'wah and benefit from my work, and study with me and gain access to my sources, the best way to do that is to join my Patreon. For $8 a month, you gain access to my notes, sources, and you get to ask me questions directly with any issues that you have and become part of a community that is working towards the same goal of becoming more learned and defending the deen. So without further ado, let's jump straight into the discussion. Alright, assalamu alaikum everyone.
What's going on? You good?
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Yeah, I'm just here to have a discussion with a brother. I think he's a Shia brother who has criticisms of the Sunni Hadith. So yeah, I'm going to have a discussion with him.
You want me around? I can help you bake him. You want me around, or should I just drop so we can have space?
No. I prefer to just keep it one-on-one. He seems pretty respectful, so I'm going to keep it respectful.
Oh, you're good. Okay, I'll drop. Assalamu
Barakallah feek. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Ahlan. How are you, akhi?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good. How are you?
Alhamdulillah.
The live which you was just on was so funny, bro. Bro, that Joshua guy, you know that Joshua guy, whatever his name is?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa
Alaikum assalam.
You know that Joshua guy who came up onto your live when Dean was there?
Yeah.
Yeah, bro, this guy which you just said that that God can't be bound by mathematics and logic.
Okay. Yeah, subhanAllah. There are a lot of ignorant people. So, was there a topic specifically you had in mind, or is there a format you want? Like, you want me to ask a question, you ask a question, or you want it just to be you asking me questions, or what do you prefer?
Well, we can engage in a conversation. So you can ask me something if you want me to ask.
Okay, no worries. So, is there a topic specifically you want to discuss, or is there like a specific issue you want to discuss?
Yes, just going to be the reliability of the Sunni Hadith corpus.
Okay, so do you want to do like reliability of Sunni Hadith versus the reliability of Shia Hadith? Like, therefore, we both attack and defend. It's fair.
No, I'm
Can you hear me?
interested in. Yeah, so I'm not like a polemical defender of Shia Hadith corpus. So I just want to know what's the positive case for the reliability of the Sunni Hadith corpus.
Yeah, no worries. I can get into that, like the positive case for the reliability of the Sunni Hadith corpus. But in order to that, it necessitates that the Shia Hadith corpus is fraudulent. So if you're not defending the Shia Hadith corpus, then essentially you're just conceding that it's fraudulent. You would agree, right? Because the Sunni narrative and the Shia narrative are completely antithetical.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if the Sunni Hadith corpus is reliable, yeah, definitely the Shia Hadith corpus for large part has to be fraudulent.
Okay, cool. No worries. And what kind of Shia are you? Are you like Tawba or Ismaili or what kind?
No, I just follow the reason. So I'm not
So
committed
you're
to dogmatic.
like Ibn Si'a or like Mullah Sadra, like the
Yes,
Mutansifin,
yes,
those types?
yes,
Okay.
yes,
So you put mind over revelation, correct?
yes, yes.
Okay. Are you a substance monist by any chance?
Yeah.
Okay, so you believe, so do you believe in like radical monism? Like you believe everything is the same thing?
Oh, well, it depends upon what you mean by radical monism. Usually we call it gradational
Substance monism.
our position.
Yeah. So the
Yeah,
illumination
gradational
itself, right?
substance.
So everything is different grades of the same thing. So essentially,
Yeah,
you are
yeah.
God and God is you, but you're different grades of the same thing, and things are only distinguished conceptually. They're not. There's no distinguishment in substance. We're all the same substance.
Well, the
that
same
correct?
substance is not exactly, because the identity of God is generated by it being pure being, and our identity is generated by being limited being. So yeah, the substance is identical insofar as the substance is being. But saying a statement
Exactly,
like,
yeah.
well, I'm identical to God.
No.
that wouldn't be
I'm
a-
not saying. I understand
Yeah,
that
yeah.
distinction. I'm just saying the same being is one, and because there's only one, then it necessitates that everything shares the same being, which includes us and God. But I'm not saying that the gradation is the same. I understand there's a distinction between God and us.
Yeah, everything doesn't share the same particular being, right? Everything shares the same category of being, right? So being is going to be reality in which you have you don't have equivocation. The affirmation of being is identical. But anyway, that's
Yeah, I understand, but still, it's interesting to understand your position. So, wait, just out of my
Yeah.
curiosity, do you believe that Allah created the heavens and the earth, or do you believe He gave the power to the Imams, and then the Imams created the heavens and the earth? Because usually, as far as I understand, in like Neoplatonic philosophies, the emanation that comes first from the nous, which in your case would be Allah, isn't the one that actually does the creation, because that would somehow imply like a, you know what I mean, like a degradation in Him, which is unbefitting of His quality. Do you understand my point? Or
no. So yeah. So we believe in a gradational view of causation. So every higher plane is going to be the existentiating cause for the lower plane, right? But for example, the material world, which is the lowest in the hierarchy of existence, it's an effect of multiple emanations. So the most direct emanatory cause for the material world is actually not the first intellect, which we call Haqiqatul Muhammadi or other names. It's Aqlul Fa'al, which is Jibra'il.
So you believe the primary cause or agent is Jibra'il?
No, not the primary, the direct.
Primary
The
and direct,
primary
I don't understand
agent.
it. I don't understand what's the distinction.
When we say primary, we mean the first, right? So the first cause is obviously the divine essence. The direct cause for the material universe is active intellect.
No, that's not what I meant. So when I said primary, I just meant that the direct, like what you mean by direct. So as long as we mean the same thing, it's fine. Okay.
Yeah, that's
I don't want to ask you. Okay, no worries. I don't want to ask you too many questions because you're here to ask me questions. So you said you wanted to hear the case for the reliability of Sunni Hadith.
Yeah.
So I don't know how familiar you are with like Orientalist or Western study of Hadith. So for example, have you read Howard Motsky, like his works, like Dating Muslim Tradition, etc.? Or
I have, but I don't really take Motsky's positions always. I think on my independent study, I think a developed form of Isnad Qummat analysis is very potent. Yeah, and I want to see if there's any argumentation against that.
Yeah, no worries. I also believe it's not good meta-analysis. like works fine, depending on which version, obviously, and what the assumptions are. So, before I like explain to you like why I believe the Sunni Hadith corpus is reliable, I just want to like understand your epistemology, because that goes into the arguments that we're saying. Because as you know, like this is a point that Motsky makes, which is why I asked you about dating Muslim traditions. He says at the end of it, I believe page 253, he says that our dating of the material, like of the Sunni tradition or the Islamic tradition in general, goes back to our preconceptions of that tradition. If we assume, for example, that there's mass workshop forgers and we approach the corpus with a priori doubt, for example, and we have these, I would say, unwarranted assumptions, like many of the revisionists do, like Schacht and Goldzinger and Little, for example, these so-called critical scholars, then you're not going to get a favorable outcome of the hadith. So I was wondering, do you approach the hadith with those same assumptions of en masse workshop forgers and a priori doubt, or do you approach it from the general historical perspective, which of the sanguine scholars like Brown and Montgomery Watt and Nadia Abbott, who say that, or for example, even Gregory Schuller, who say that, look, we need to give people the benefit of the doubt, and we're going to trust them until they show us a reason not to trust them. And that's how we derive historical knowledge. So I was wondering which epistemology you use.
Yeah, so I mean, once we reach a single strand, right, then I'm gonna obviously look at the evidence as to whether the report appears to be historical or not, right? I'm not really in favor.
I'm not asking about single strands. Single strands are their own thing. I'm not really asking about that. I'm not asking about, in principle, let's say you have a hadith, it's attributed to the Prophet, right? Like, let's say the farewell sermon. Would you look at the farewell sermon and say that, look, I'm going to be doubtful that this is attributed to the Prophet until I see corroboration of it, and until I see like these long list of factors, like it doesn't have any supernatural bias, doesn't have any prophetic foretelling, it doesn't have any of whatever, doesn't violate HCM and the principle of analogy? Or are you going to say, I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt because it's a historical report, and that's how we do history generally, and only if I see that there's like forgery or corruption or, you know, false attribution, or I have a reason to be skeptical, a positive reason to be skeptical, then I'll have reason to doubt the hadith or reject the hadith. Like, that's what I'm wondering generally, because single strands is its own issue. I know we can talk about that later.
Yeah, so if you have a particular report, I would think that it could very well go back to the Prophet. There's a possibility of it going back to the Prophet. I would need to see evidence for that, right? And there are degrees of evidence. A weak kind of evidence is just going to be, okay, this person heard from this person, and, some kind of testimony that these people are reliable and they heard from each other. That's going to be one type of evidence, and I would take
why do you consider that? Why do you consider that to be weak? That's my question. Because my question is, because I don't know if you're aware of the... Yeah, go ahead.
Because I think they're relative. Yeah, because in comparison, they're relatively stronger types of evidences, right?
So if you had, for example, like five corroborating chains, right, and they're all relaying the same gist of the report with minor variations, right, and you can date it let's say to the
so five corroborating chains so five corroborating chains is going to be more is going to bring in more confidence than, for example, one chain. So it's just going to be based on the hierarchy. It's just going to be based on the hierarchy of evidence.
I understand, but I don't think you're answering my question. My question is, because in the epistemology of Western scholarship, Harold Motsky summarizes three main groups: the traditional or sanguine scholars, the middle path scholars, which he considers himself amongst, like Motsky, Schuller, Andreas Gorke, for example, and then you have the revisionists or the like ultra skeptical guys, right? And the revisionists start off with the assumption that everything is a priori doubtful, and we can't trust anything until it meets these really, really extreme criteria that Yumbel has, for example. You have the traditional scholars that, like, for example, like Montgomery Watt or Nadia Abbott or Al-Azami or whoever you want, or, for example, Zain, for example, who will say, like, no, we have to give these traditions the benefit of the doubt because that's how we use history generally. And then you have people in the middle who try and take a middle path, like, for example, Motsky or Schuller, who try and use, like you say, it's not good meta-analysis to critically look in between and try and sift through it through the lens of HCM. So what I'm asking you essentially is which category do you fit in?
I think the middle path is going to be the most useful. Yeah, you can definitely give things benefit of the doubt, but we need to be clear about our hierarchy of evidence, right? So yeah, the when you're giving benefit of the doubt, it's gonna be lower than when you actually have, corroborative evidence.
I suppose to be like more specific, what I'm asking is like, let's take the farewell sermon, for example. This hadith is mutawatir. It's transmitted through, I think, like seven chains that are independently corroborated, multiple companions narrate it, and it was witnessed by supposedly 10,000 people, correct? And all of them narrate the same gist, though they might have minor variations in wording or ordering. So this hadith would be considered mutawatir by every stretch of the imagination, and scholars like Montgomery Watt and Motsky would accept it as like the gist of it to be authentic. So I'm saying, would you with what degree of confidence would you say this goes back to the Prophet? I think you say it's possible, but to what degree of confidence? That's what I'm asking you essentially.
I'll tell you what I do. So obviously, I'm not gonna just take the claim of there being independent corroboration at face value. So I'm going to do isnad ko matn analysis of that and see if the chains actually are independently corroborated or not. And if they are independently corroborated and the Prophet is the common link, then with the high amount of certainty, I'm going to accept that attribution. If, for example, the common link appears to be in the generation of the Sahaba, I'm still going to have a good amount of confidence. Obviously, it's not going to be as high as, the Prophet being the common link. And for example, if it's in the generation of Tabi'un, then it's going to be a little lower than that, and so on.
If you could trace a report that with via isnad matan analysis to, let's say, Aisha, or to somewhere in the last quarter of the 7th century, like what degree of probability would you assign to it? Like 95%, 90%, like roughly?
So in the age of Aisha, you're asking?
No, not for the age of Aisha report. We can talk about like that little thesis. I'm asking if there was a report, if there was a report attributed to Aisha, and it was not just like traditionally attributed to Aisha, but also it was attributed to Aisha through isnad matan analysis. Like someone like Motsky and Kara would accept it as a attribution to Aisha and likely to be prophetic. To what degree of confidence would you say, okay, since these scholars have done isnad matan analysis on this hadith and they've ascertained that this attribution to Aisha is very likely historical, what degree of probability would you assign to that? That's what I'm asking.
So when is the common link?
The common link is Aisha.
Oh, the common link is Aisha? Yeah, then, good amount of certainty. I would say. Like,
but what is that? I'm asking for a number.
Yeah.
When you say good, what does that mean?
Around like 80 to 100, somewhere in that range. Well, obviously, there are other factors as well. There might be some additional factors as, polemical motives or something. Generally, if the common link is Aisha, it would be pretty... it would be pretty likely for it to be historical.
Okay, so I'll show you an example of what I'm talking about, and perhaps this will make it a little bit more concrete for you, right? So this is from. Have you read Kara's book, The Integrity of the Quran?
Yeah.
Okay. So see this? I put it on screen. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
So this is the report
kind of blurry
about.
For me.
Okay, well, I can read it out to you if it's blurry. So this report is the abrogation of breastfeeding. The verse is about breastfeeding, correct? And the verse is about stoning. And this report is also mutawatir. And as noted here, Motsky and Kara both accept it, and they refute Shah, and he says that it's possible to date it to Aisha or even earlier to the time of the Prophet. But with a report like this that is attributed correctly to Aisha in the Sunni canon, it's found in, for example, Sahih Muslim, and I believe it's also in Bukhari, as well as other the other reports like At-Tirmidhi and Ibn Dawood with different variations, obviously. Would you say you would accept this report as authentic?
If it goes back through isnad matan analysis to Aisha, yes, I would.
Yes. So Kara does
but I'm not very on this. Kara actually does not do isnad matan analysis, even though he calls it isnad matan analysis.
No. I mean, you can disagree about the labels, but essentially what he's doing is cataloging each set of clusters and adducing the different variations, the correlations between the variations of the tradents and the actual gist of the report, and then seeing if there's transmission. So I would call that isnad matan analysis.
No, I don't think he's doing that. The reason for that is he doesn't look yeah, the reason for that is, by the way, Ali Jan has a review on this book as well, where he goes into some detail about it. But the essential problem with Kara's methodology is that he's not taking into account the possibility of contamination. So he doesn't correlate particular wordings, and he doesn't really reconstruct the Ur text of any particular partial common link. So once you don't reconstruct the Urs of, yeah,
I disagree.
Once you don't reconstruct, yeah, sure. I mean, I don't have a problem if he actually is applying ikma. There's no problem in it going back to Aisha. Then I'll accept it. But I do think he doesn't do it properly.
Okay, so you're saying because he doesn't reconstruct the Ur text.
Yeah, he doesn't reconstruct the Ur text, and he doesn't correlate particular Ur text with particular traders.
I don't think that's true. Have you actually read it? Because he goes through each cluster and then he describes which variations are problematic.
Yes.
So essentially, when you get a gist of a report and then you figure out which parts are embellishments or additions by certain traders, then essentially what you've done is reconstructed the Ur text.
Well, the problem, I think it's not really relevant to the topic for now, because I could just say, okay, yeah, it's fine. It's a more of a tertiary point whether Kara's analysis is correct or not. But just hypothetically, if it goes back to Aisha, yeah, I'll say it has a high probability of going back.
Okay, so then would you concede then that specific data point is in support of the overall Sunni narrative, because this attribution is authentic both according to Western standards of criticism and also according to Sunni standards of criticism. So as scientifically as we can trace this report, the attribution to Aisha is correct, and there were these verses that were abrogated.
Yeah, sure. I don't have a problem with accepting that.
Okay, no worries. Okay, so that's I suppose that would be like 1 point in favor of the traditional Sunni Hadith corpus. I would add another point being, for example, the non-Muslim corroboration of events. So are you familiar with the earliest like non-Muslim accounts? Like, for example, Robert Hoyland's work specifically?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, for example, when you notice that, I mean, I can just put it up on screen. I have these sources ready because I'm going to be debating a Hadith rejector. So, for example, this is Alaq, right? You're familiar with his work or not really?
I know about him. I haven't read him.
Okay, cool. Have you read this book or no? Have you read the History of Legal Theories or no?
No, not this one.
Okay. So I'll just read it out to you. He's talking specifically about the reign of Abu Bakr, and he's talking about the basically the formative period of the Sunnah, so the prophetic Sunnah. He says that the importance of the Quran and its injunctions for early Muslims can hardly be overstated. Early Munafiqite sources inform us that when Abu Bakr first entered Syria, he addressed the generals with the following words: "You will enter the land, kill neither old man nor child, establish a covenant with every city and people who receive you, give them your assurances and lead them and let them live according to their laws. Those who do not receive you, you are to fight, conducting yourselves carefully in accordance with the ordinances and upright laws transmitted from you to the prophets." Essentially the laws of the Prophet that are ascribed to you. Now, here, what's vital is that this saying that Abu Bakr is transmitting and is recorded by early Christians is actually also found in the Hadith, in multiple Hadith, where the Prophet commands and forbids the killing of women and children and non-combatants, as well as the targeting of, for example, places of worship and trees and cattle and things like that. So Abu Bakr is transmitting a hadith from the Prophet, and it's found in the extant hadith corpus. It's also corroborated by early non-Muslim witnesses.
I think that would be good evidence for it being reliable.
Okay, cool. So that would be another point in favor of the reliability of the Sunni hadith corpus. Okay, cool. No worries. So then, I suppose, how many of these would you have to see? Like, how many of these data points of corroboration would you have to see for you to reconsider your position?
Well, these are just 2 data points, so this is a pretty non-substantial evidence.
No, I understand. In the grand scheme of the hadith corpus, it's negligible. But I'm saying, let's say there are 100, because with Western dating methods and with non-Muslim sources of corroboration, these sources are scanty to begin with. So it's not like I can show you for each hadith, a non-Muslim corroborating it, or with each hadith we can trace it to the Prophet via isnad kun matan analysis. In fact, the majority of reports we can't do that with, correct?
Yeah, well, that's the problem. If you have a common link, which is 150 years later, yeah, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
I understand how that's problematic from your perspective. Yeah, there's no issue. But I guess my point is, like, how many instances of external corroboration would be sufficient for you to be like, okay, all right, I've seen enough faith in this corpus for me to consider it to be reliable?
Oh, well, it's going to depend more on the traders, So I'm going to look at it more in the sense of, oh, well, this tradent appears to be very well corroborated in many cases. So, for example, I'll give you an example. Malik bin Anas appears to be very well corroborated in many instances. So generally, even if Malik is reporting from a single strand, I would say, yeah, it at least goes back one generation. At least Malik is probably not lying. Similarly, Shafi'i is many times very well corroborated. Abdul Razak is at many times very well corroborated. So,
and what about, for example, Ma'mar and Ibn Jurayj? Would you consider them also reliable? Or?
Yeah. So no. So Ibn Jurayj, for example, no, there we have a bottleneck, so that would be more problematic.
So what do you mean by bottleneck exactly? Do you mean like a regional bottleneck? Is that what you're talking about?
No, and so for example, in many of the traditions transmitted from Ibn Jurayj, Ibn Jurayj is in fact a common link. So there, we come in.
I wouldn't have an issue with Ibn Jurayj being a common link, because how many people are between him and the Prophet? Like 2 or 3?
Yeah, I'm not saying I have an issue with him being the common link, but once he's the common link, we can't really corroborate it, right? That's what common link means. So I was just telling you that, well, Abdul Razak appears to very...
I don't think that's true. You can corroborate things beyond the common link. So if you have, for example, 2 or 3 common links, you can reasonably infer that the tradition goes back earlier than that.
Yeah, of course. But I was talking about the cases where Ibn Jurayj is a common link, and
if it's just him by himself, then you're right. Yeah, but you said the definition of a common link is that you can't go back further, which is wrong.
Well, you can't go back further in that particular ascension. Yeah, you can go back further. Yeah, in other ways. Yeah,
that's fine. You've clarified. So I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Yeah, sure. So what I was saying is that if a tradent is very well corroborated, like a Shafi'i or Malik or Bukhari or Abdul Razak, for example. So yeah, I'm pretty willing to grant that they did indeed transmit the content from their teacher.
Okay.
But once the teachers are not corroborated, that's where we are run into a problem. So for example, we're going to run into problems like Az-Zuhri. Right.
Yeah, so I've seen you post about Zuhri, and I've seen, like, for example, Shula problematizing a few things here and there regarding his additions or the things that he adds. And to be honest, I've looked into it, and I don't find his arguments to be altogether too convincing. I think a lot of it can be chalked up to incorrect attributions to Zuhri. Like, I don't think the attributions are necessarily correct, and I think a lot of them are bottlenecked, especially the ones that Shula considers to be problematic. If I could show you the transmission, like the graph itself, that would be helpful. But
sure, what exactly are you thinking about? Because what I posted, it was particularly about Az-Zuhri's transmission with complete chains, which is not corroborated.
Yeah, but I don't find the fact that it's not corroborated to be like a point against the Zuhri. Like,
that's fine.
A single strand, like, I understand, like, from your perspective, obviously I understand that a single strand obviously it doesn't hold the same amount of epistemological weight as a corroborated strand. There's no issue. Of course, I believe that as well. I don't say that just because there's
here the issue. No. So that's not the issue. The issue is not it just being a single strand. The issue is that the other strand, in fact, has a version.
No, I understand.
So
you're saying that there are other versions that have things that it doesn't have, right?
yes, that's the main problem. Because so once we just let me finish. So, for example, once we consider what is more likely to happen, right? The Urwa transmitted a complete chain, a connected chain, and just happened to be the case that Hisham bin Urwa failed to report it, and Az-Zuhri did not fail to report it. Or what's more likely is that, Urwa ibn Zubayr did not transmit a full chain, and Hisham is actually transmitting how he heard it from Urwa, and Zuhri has an addition that was in fact not part of Urwa's book. So that's just going to be some kind of textual criticism.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, I'm happy to run down that logic, but I don't think that logic is exhaustive. Like, for example, how do you preclude the possibility that Zuhri transmitted it and it just didn't get preserved?
Well, Az-Zuhri transmitted it. Az-Zuhri transmitted an unraised version. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's not part of Az-Zuhri's Ur. As far as we can
I know, because it's I understand that, but what I'm saying is, imagine Az-Zuhri transmits two versions, because hadith is oral, so he's not going to be transmitting the same version each time he narrates the hadith. There'll be variation. So let's say one of the times he transmits a version that doesn't contain the same relevant sequence or parts that the other tradents do narrate, but another time he does, or let's say one day he forgets, and on one time he does narrate it, other time he doesn't, and the one that doesn't get narrated happens to be preserved, the other one doesn't happen to be preserved. I'm saying that's a possibility that you can't.
Yes,
that doesn't really. You know what I mean?
But that possibility has no bearing on what we're talking about. Right. That would just mean that in one case, Az-Zuhri actually transmitted Urwa's Ur reliably, and in another case, he didn't do so. Right.
Yeah.
So the real question. The real question.
I don't think I hold. Yeah. So for someone like Az-Zuhri, I don't think I hold him to the standard of being a photocopier. Because like we said, we can discern like which parts are authentic and which parts aren't. And Az-Zuhri, or even someone like Al-Amash, someone who's known to do tadlis, or to he might not be the highest tier narrator, like someone like even like Ibn Ishaq, for example, is like a mid-tier narrator. And we know he does reductions of certain material that others earlier than him transmit, like in Adwa's letters, for example. But I don't think that's a point against those transmitters who are like slightly, like obviously I agree that overall they'll be branded as weaker narrators, but I don't think that's a point against their reliability, and to say that therefore we can't use Zuhri, or Zuhri is problematic, we can't use Zuhri.
Well, I'm not saying you can't use Zuhri. If he's corroborated, you sure can. The problem is that he has transmitted content that doesn't appear to be from his teacher. That's the problem. Yeah, the raised isnad are unlikely to originate from Urwa, because if Urwa transmitted the muttasil asanid, we will expect Hisham bin Urwa to transmit them as well, which he doesn't. It actually is pretty consistent. Hisham bin Urwa is pretty consistent in not transmitting muttasil asanid from Urwa in the case of biography.
I understand the criticism, and I don't think it have weight. And I think you agree that it doesn't warrant not using Az-Zuhri, especially when he's corroborated, or it doesn't mean that therefore like.
No, I'm no problem if it's corroborated. If he, for example, when he's corroborated at least till Urwa by Hisham, right? So exactly, that's pretty acceptable. That's why we can reconstruct it back to Urwa. In many cases, since we have two substantial corpuses which come from different strands, and since there's a substantial overlap with them, in many cases you can even accept the single strands. For example, even though I don't really agree with it, but Gerke and Schuler, they actually accept the single strand of Prophet being suicidal, for example. Yeah. So, I mean, you can do that. But the problem is
why do you? Sorry, if I could just ask a question. So why do you reject single strands then? If you see Gerke and Schuler doing it?
Oh no, I don't reject it. I was talking particularly about the single strand of Prophet being suicidal. So that was a single strand from Az-Zuhri. But I don't accept it. But Gerke and Schuler, they actually accept it as going back to Urwa.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean,
So yeah.
We also accept the attribution to Zuhri, but we don't, doesn't mean it's authentic, right?
Oh no. I also accept the attribution to Az-Zuhri. That's pretty unquestionable. But Gerke and Schuler, they actually trace it back to Urwa. Right? That I'm not very sure of. I don't think it. It might go back to Urwa, but I don't think we have evidence of positive.
Yeah, I think that's definitely more like speculative, not as certain. So I wouldn't really put too much weight on that. Okay, I mean, I suppose I see.
Do you think it goes back to Urwa or not?
I don't think it does. I don't think that's been sufficiently shown.
Yeah. Great.
Okay, so I mean, I think we're finding a lot of common ground here. So I suppose, can I ask you, so as a Shia, obviously sectarian notions come into play, especially when looking at the Hadith. And what comes to mind is, for example, the criticism of Goldzinger. So, like, if I could just get like your thoughts on that, like, so what do you, or like, do you take issue with sectarian Hadith? Like, for example, the Hadith of Thaqalain, which is recorded in Sunni sources and Shia sources, but it's recorded in Sunni sources. Would you say that Hadith is authentic on the basis of its content?
No.
In that, like, it ties directly with the Quran?
To study the historicity of any Hadith, we need to perform an isnad matn analysis.
Yeah, but brethren, so for example, you said you follow like the Mullah Sadra school, Ibn Sina school of philosophers, right?
Yeah, sure.
Right, okay. And Mullah Sadra and Ibn Sina, they didn't have isnad matn analysis, correct?
Yeah, I mean, they were living in another time.
Okay, cool. So
I follow them in aqliyat, in maqulat, not in manqulat.
No worries. That doesn't really make a difference to my point. My point is that your school of thought accepts hadith, even though I grant that they don't accept them to be as authoritative as, for example, we accept hadith as Sunnis, but still they accept hadith when it's in line with the aqliyat, obviously. And I'm asking, on what basis do they accept hadith? Do you understand? So I'm asking from the usul of your school. You personally may decide to just, okay, it must be confirmed by Isnad matn.
Yeah.
So that's fine.
Yeah. So
do you understand my question?
Yes, I understand your question. I'm personally not really follower of their school in that sense, right? I'm a follower of their school in a philosophical sense. But yeah, they have a pretty rudimentary understanding, which is like, oh yeah, this thing is transmitted, and this appears to be well corroborated. So yeah, it must have been transmitted. They didn't have a very, I wouldn't say they have a sophisticated understanding of reconstructing or dating ahadith back. And even for example, even in like traditional scholarship, it's not like all the people have the same level of, like, some like imams of ilal, they have a much more sophisticated, like that, I would say, for example, Dara Qutni has a much more sophisticated understanding.
Ibn Hazm, for example. I get what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would ask then as a follow-up is, so you say you don't follow them in terms of the epistemology, in terms of accepting hadith, you just follow them in terms of aqliyat. In that case, I would say that, I guess that would put you in the category of a modern Shi'i mutafalsif, correct?
Yeah, sure, you can say that.
Okay. So what role do the hadith play in your everyday life? So for example, I don't think you would use Sunni hadith, you'd probably use Shia hadith still, correct? Or no?
No.
So you'd use so you don't use Al-Kafi? You don't use Al-Kafi?
No, I'm equally skeptical of both the hadith corpus.
Wait, why do you call yourself Shia? Is it just because you believe the Shia narrative has more like weight historically, or?
Yeah, just probabilistically. Well, it depends upon what Shia narrative you're talking about. But yeah, I think, for example, with respect to the community that coalesced around Baqir and Jafar, that's just going to be, I think, more in line with the Shia narrative than the Sunni narrative.
So what about the, like, for example, I think you're aware that there are fabrications attributed to Ja'far al-Sadiq by people like, for example, Hisham bin Salam and Zurara that are known not just by like critical scholars, but if I could just finish, not just known by critical scholars, but also by, for example, your own, like the traditional Shia scholars even. Like, for example, Al-Majlisi says like I think 70% of Al-Kafi, which is the most authentic Shia book, is like weak narrations or maqtu'at, or fabrications essentially. But that doesn't mean that they don't have weight historically. I'm not saying that obviously a weak hadith or a fabricated hadith can still have weight historically or even from a traditional perspective. But I'm saying that how do you deal with that personally, like, when you see a bunch of false attributions to Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq? Like, do you, like, for example, if you were to use the hadith jurisprudentially, would you say it has to be isnad kun dated to Ja'far al-Sadiq, otherwise I can't use it? Or how does it work?
Yeah, so I don't really care about what like Mohsini or Majlisi say. Like obviously they're talking from a very different perspective. Yeah, just jurisprudentially, I think there's a lot of overlap between the Ja'fari and the Madinan school. So
especially the Hanafis.
Personal practice.
Especially the Hanafis.
Well, actually, more the Malikis and the Jafaris in many cases than the Hanafis and the Jafaris.
Yeah, well, that goes to the student because Jafar was a teacher of Imam Malik, obviously. But I mean, in terms of the fiqh that they developed.
Yes, or it could also be explained by them occupying the same geographical location. So yeah, just generally, I try to reconstruct the positions of Ahlul Madinah. Which I think can be pretty reliably reconstructed. I think many of the positions, the fiqhi positions of the historical Ja'far al-Sadiq can also be reconstructed because there's a lot of corroboration.
Do you believe
in the?
Sorry, do you believe that the historical Ja'far al-Sadiq used isnad kun meta-analysis to discern hadith and fiqh? Or do you believe that just because he's an imam, therefore like he knows what's authentic and what's not? Like he just has ilm ma yakun?
No, I think he was just transmitting what he heard from his father. That's his claim.
So his epistemology
that's not something we can confirm.
I mean, yeah, but then his epistemology would be more similar to mine than yours, right?
Yeah, he probably had a similar understanding. I don't think anyone at that time had like a isnad cum matan analysis understanding of dating the traditions. Well, he had a family tradition to begin with, so yeah.
Yeah, agreed. So do you believe in the distortion of the Quran, or do you hold that it's fully preserved? Because that's also part of the Shia narrative.
Yeah, so we don't really have evidence of full preservation, but the evidence that we have, that does show it's highly stable. It's a very stable text, at least back to Osman. But I do think there might have been some changes.
Okay, so what kind of changes are you talking about? So what changes?
Yeah. So for example, in Surah Maryam, there's a verse, Inni nazartu lirrahmani sawma, and there's an alternative reading, Inni nazartu lirrahmani sawma wa samta, falanukallima al-yawma insiya. So some changes like that, minute changes of wordings.
And do you believe those changes of wording go back to the Prophet, or they're added in by companions?
Well, I don't think we can reconstruct that. That's just going to be a question we don't really have an answer to.
I mean, okay, so I suppose I'd ask it like this. Like, so for example, if you look at someone like Martin van Putten, he would say that the hadith talking about the 7 modes is very likely authentic and is actually prophetic. And that would explain why there are all these variations. It's just the simplest explanation.
That, I don't think anyone has done an ikma on that. Martin van Putten is not really an expert on hadith dating. Yeah, so somebody would need to do an ikma for me to be convinced that it goes back to the Prophet. Yeah, but if it goes back to the Prophet, and then you can show that, yeah, the Prophet likely had multiple distinct readings. So that would be good evidence.
Okay, but I mean, there are reports talking about variations that I think we can date to companions.
Oh yeah, I think variations actually can be dated back to companions. I think there were different alternative codices.
No, I agree.
But-
Like, that's fine. But what I'm saying is that the companions are attributing this to the Prophet. We have a report where Umar is saying that this variation goes back to the Prophet.
Oh, two different variations go back to the Prophet?
Yeah.
Is that
Like
what you're
that. Speak
saying?
about that out of. Yeah, so what I'm saying is like the like, remember before when I was asking about like mutawatir and isnad kul matan analysis, like there has been isnad kul matan analysis of certain reports talking about the variations, and those variations are attributed to companions, like with high likelihood, again, like last quarter of the 1st century. And then if that's the case, then I would say I would put my trust in those companions that the variation does go back to the Prophet. I mean, I also take Martin Van Puren's work seriously, even though he's not a scholar of hadith, he's a specialist in the Quran, but he's also looking into the hadith as well, even if he doesn't do isnad kal matan analysis himself.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really take him seriously in that. I don't think anyone who actually studies hadith critically would. I don't understand what you were saying about variation. So are you saying that there are hadiths where you have two distinct variations, or there are hadiths where the Sahaba are saying that the Prophet said, "Oh, the Quran was revealed in different ahruf"?
No. So that's one hadith that I'm saying is likely prophetic according to various scholars, but that's not what I'm talking about then. When I was speaking about the variations, what I was saying is that there's reports, like just like before how I showed you those reports talking about...
what does the report say, if you could just tell me?
Yeah, so there are reports, for example, attributed to Umar, where Umar says, هَكَذَا أُنزِلَتْ وَهَكَذَا أُنزِلَت. Or I heard it like this and I heard it like that. It was revealed like this and revealed like that.
Okay. Yeah, so there
and he gives the two different variations.
Yeah, yes, that's good. That would be good evidence. It would have to be traced back to Umar through isnad kal matan analysis.
Okay. And can I ask you, do you believe the historical Umar was like a he believed in the same positions as you, in terms of the aqliyat? Like, do you believe he was a substance monist and, he believed in the same... Okay. So why do you consider him an authority if he had the distinct theology compared to yours?
Well, somebody doesn't need to have the same theology as me to be a reliable reporter.
No, I understand, but that's fine. I don't hold to that position either. Like, for example, Imam al-Dhahabi says that we can take people with tashayya, tafdiliyya, and we can use them, and it would actually be a great transgression if we didn't take reports from them because they're reliable. Just because they have some unorthodox views doesn't mean that, we throw them away. But my question is, when someone, for example, Umar doesn't believe in imamah, correct? Because imams haven't even come yet, correct?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so if someone doesn't believe in imamah, how are you taking from him? That's like essentially what I'm asking you.
Well, what's the problem? If somebody is transmitting something historically, and I think there's good reason to believe that this particular content is not fabricated, doesn't really matter what the theological views of that person is.
Okay, fine. Let me try and make the more explicit, I guess. Umar, you believe Umar usurped Ali, correct? He took something from Ali that wasn't his.
Well, I don't think we can reconstruct Islamic history in that early in great detail.
You said you believe the Shia narrative.
Yeah, with respect to Ja'far al-Sadiq, not before him.
Okay, then I must have misunderstood you because I thought you meant you're taking the whole Shia narrative from the time of the Prophet down onwards.
Not.
Okay, so you're saying only from Ja'far al-Sadiq you take... Okay. So you don't believe that Umar usurped Ali then?
Well, that's not something we can reconstruct historically as of now. Maybe in future.
If you believe that. I'm asking if you believe that.
No, my beliefs are based on evidence. So if I can't reconstruct something, I am not going to believe it.
Okay. So then, do you also believe Umar's caliphate
there appears to be an early narrative that Umar usurped Ali's position, but it's not something we can. I would say, what's happening is basically we have a bottleneck where we just have these distinct groups, and they have their versions of history, and we don't really have a very constructive way of reconstructing the original version.
Do you believe we can reconstruct the Prophet's seerah with any degree of certainty, like the core events of his seerah?
Yes, that we can.
Okay, so why is it you believe that we can reconstruct earlier than Umar supposed usurping Ali, but we can't reconstruct like a little bit after of the supposed infighting between the companions?
Yes, because many of the earlier points, they are not differentiated. Well, even in the seerah, there are points of differentiation, and then again, we are going to run into a problem of distinct bottlenecks there. For example, like, did Ghadir Khum happen or not? That's going to be one question about seerah.
Ghadir Khum is massively transmitted.
Yeah, but
من كنت مولاه هذا علي مولاه is like, I accept it happened, and because it's in Sunni reports and Shia reports, and it's tested massively. It's not just like one or two reports.
Yeah, well, that doesn't really matter. What matters is isnad method analysis.
No, I understand. But what I'm saying is, yeah, no worries. But what I'm saying is, if you look at the actual chains, like I haven't done isnad method analysis myself, but if you look at the actual chains, you can see distinctive clusters already forming. Like, you don't have to do the method analysis. You can look at it, the chain yourself, and you can already, like, in your head, picture the different clusters. You can look at the Kufan cluster, the Basran cluster, the Medinian cluster. All of them are narrating Ghadir Khum. The likelihood that they're all like converging on a false memory is extremely improbable.
Well, that needs to be looked into. I think Ivan Su is writing something on that, so it would be out soon. But yeah, that's a question. But what I was saying is that there are many events in the seerah that would have been accepted by that would basically have attained cross-sectarian agreement, right? And those factors that attained cross-sectarian agreement, they're just going to be more reliable. But the factors that do not attain cross-sectarian agreement, then we have a problem with reconstructing what exactly happened. So, for example, like there appears to be like partial cross-sectarian agreement against Osman, right? There's the negative portrayals of Osman in
so you mean between the Khawarij, like for example, the Khawarij, you have Aisha, you have like other companions criticizing Uthman on certain issues. So that's what you mean, right? But it's the same thing for the Quran, because the Quran is pre-sectarian. Like all the like every sect agrees on the Quran. The Quran is pre-sectarian, right? So therefore, it's like extremely likely authentic.
Well, it's not it is in content. It is pre-sectarian. So yeah, for example, I don't really accept like the Shi'i narrations about Ali's or
Mus'haf Fatima and his own. Yeah, I get you. So you don't believe, for example, like those reports in, for example, Tafsir al-Kummi, where like they say like, there are these verses that were distorted or added in. Like, for example, the verse used to be like, I have bestowed favor upon Al Ibrahim wa Al Muhammad ala al-alamin. And you don't believe that Al Muhammad was there originally. You believe this is like a polemical fabrication.
Yeah, I think it's a polemical fabrication.
I definitely agree. I suppose my question to you is,
other reports appear to be more substantial. For example, one Shi'i report about like فَمَا اسْتَمْتَعْتُمْ بِهِ مِنْهُنَّ إِلَىٰ أَجَلٍ مُسَمَّى فَآتُوهُنَّ أُجُورَهُنَّ. So that qira'ah to me appears to be more substantial. It's something that's not just reported by the Shia. So that would be something that's more substantial. So I would accept something like Muta to be historical.
Yeah, fair enough. Do you have any questions for me? We've been going at it for about an hour at this point. And yeah, I mean, I've had it's interesting conversation, and I appreciate the respectful dialogue. Do you have any questions you want to ask me, or anything you want to say?
Yeah, so I'm always interested in positive evidence for the Sunni Hadith corpus, right? So one thing that you presented for in favor of the Sunni Hadith corpus is stylometric analysis, and I have had discussions with Ammar?
Refuting Orientalists.
Refuting yes.
I've seen those discussions.
I'm pretty unconvinced by this domain of stylometric analysis. I think there's just a fundamental misunderstanding as in what the stylometric analysis is, what the data is saying, and how it's being interpreted.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at, for example,
I just want to ask you a question.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Because Ammar was just said something that I think is beyond. No traditionalist would even say that. He was claiming that the majority of ahadith are actually riwaya bil lafz. So do you hold the same position, or do you think that
No. Most hadith are riwaya fil ma'na. It's about like 10% that are lafzi.
Yeah, well, how are you going to apply stylometric analysis on that which is just transmitted by meaning?
Yeah, no worries. You can reconstruct the text, and then you can do stylometric analysis on the text.
Yeah, but the text is not going to be even in its own self-perception. It's not going to be the literal wording of the Prophet. So, like,
we're not claiming it's the literal proper. No, but we're not claiming that's not the claim. The claim is not that. Go ahead.
No, but the problem is from a lexical point of view, it's going to have distinct authorship.
I understand. Do you accept stylometric analysis for the Quran?
As in, like, it's just generally
like the stuff the stuff that Sinai does and Bengani. That's what I'm speaking about specifically. Like, if you want me to be specific.
Yeah, it depends upon what particular, like, stylometric analysis is not one thing. It's like,
I understand. But for example, and I'm aware of.
So I've read like Sadeghi's paper, for example, on I don't know about
which one.
What did Sinai write about it? Well, Sadeghi has this paper in Arabic.
The Codex of a Companion.
No.
The Codex of a Companion.
No, it's just a very long paper about stylometric analysis of the Quran. About
so the chronology of the Quran, a stylometric research program.
Yes,
that's the one you're talking about.
Yeah,
the one where it says that the Quran has one author. Yeah, the one that I quoted in my videos, right?
Yes, that one.
Yeah, exactly. So specifically, we'll get into Sinai later. Specifically with this, what is she doing in this paper?
Yeah. So what Sadeghi is essentially doing is that he is saying that there is one particular arrangement that entails consistent development of distinct feature sets. So, well, that's pretty odd. That's not going to be explainable by random chance. So, therefore, this arrangement must be chronological, and, well, it fits well with single authorship.
Exactly right. And he talks about for example, unvariate assessments of smoothness and the mean verse lengths. And then he uses that to come to the conclusion that these distinctive clusters of stylometric analysis, like the H clusters or the like whatever clustering method she's using, are in congruence with the hypothesis. It's a he. It's not I'm saying she. I'm sick. It sounds like a she. I know it's a he. Yeah. Anyway, but my point is that he is coming to the conclusion that this evidence is more in line with, obviously, single authorship, correct?
Yeah, and I'm although I don't fully agree with his argumentation.
Which part do you disagree with?
He assumes that feature sets are going to be independent. But that's just something I think that can be challenged. Apart from that, I do agree with his conclusion. I just don't agree with his with one particular very central assumption. But the rest of the content I've read on stylometry on the hadith purpose, that's just not like that. That in no way proves the single authorship of hadith. Like that's not even close.
Yeah. 1 second. So first, do you know what principle? Just wait. Yeah. We'll get there. Do you know what principal component analysis is?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So when she's doing principal component analysis, the variance that she's talking about is representative of the different components of the text, right? And then these variations, or like what she calls morphs, into different clusters that are then further clustered. Those clusters themselves also include the variations, like the variations of the actual text.
Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way, like the Quran, you accept that the Quran is more than one harf, or do you only accept Hafs's reading?
Well, I don't think we can reconstruct the original as of yet.
No, I'm not, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, do you accept multiple recitations, or do you only accept one recitation? Like if I read to you a Warsh, would you say this is incorrect? Or would you correct me and say this is not Quran? Or would you say this is Quran? Okay. So if I said like Malik Yawmiddin or Malik Yawmiddin, you would say like, I don't know which is Quran, which is not Quran.
Yeah, I don't know which is the prophetic reading. True. Or
Okay,
maybe
no worries.
both of them are.
Yeah, I mean, I say both of them are, but if you say you don't know, I feel that's problematic.
Why? I mean, if you can critically reconstruct it, then I'd be more than happy to accept it.
Yeah, I don't accept your standard of what you consider critical. For me, the attribution to Uthman is enough to know that it goes back to the Prophet. The variations, like I already explained to you, I believe that the hadith of 7 modes is authentic, and I believe I can like show that by its mass transmitted. We can get to the discussion about bottlenecks and whatever, that's fine. But I'm saying it's the simplest explanation that explains the most evidence. Like just by Occam's razor, we would expect it. And also the thing about geographical bottlenecks, I don't think that holds either. But the point here that's I think more relevant is that when we speak about, for example, you say like, oh, it's not critically, proven, or it's not, to my standard. Therefore, I say I don't know. You do tawaqqus. I don't think that's a standard that any historian would say. So, for example, you still say that the Quran is as utterances of the Prophet, correct? Like even Patricia Cohen accepts that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, you can only critically prove that it goes to Uthman, that it's ascribed to Uthman. The Uthmanic Rasm goes back to Uthman, correct?
Yes, the Osmanic Rasm goes back to Osman.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So how do you go from the attribution of the Osmanic Rasm to the Prophet? Like, what's the jump there?
Well, it's just going to be based on the attribution itself and the lack of anachronism in the text.
Yeah. No worries. I accept that reasoning, by the way. But I just do the same thing where I say it's the same thing for the qira'at. There's no anachronisms in the qira'at, and it's attributed all to the Prophet. It's mass transmitted. Like these are all like mass transmitted.
Yeah.
10 readings.
So yeah. So it's.
But if you accept one for the other, then I don't see why the double standard.
Yeah. So no. I it's not like I'm very skeptical of the readings. Some I am. For example, Salamun ala Ilyasin. That one I just think on orthographic grounds is going to be questionable.
I mean, I accept that there are some like that are like gharib or strange or whatever. Like that's granted.
No, Salamun ala Ilyasin is actually it's the Hafs reading. So it's actually now it's the majority reading of it.
Yeah, but I wouldn't accept that it's problematic. I don't think that's problematic.
Yeah, sure, but yeah. But I do think it is. And we can go into why I think that. But yeah, apart from that, it's not like I'm very skeptical of the alternative readings.
Okay, so you would be happy to accept like Warsh and Duri and whatever other readings?
Yeah.
No worries. I'm going back to, I think you, because I don't want to derail too much.
So
the original points you wanted was stylometric
and yes.
Yeah, right. I mean, if you want to talk to refuting Orientalists, I mean, his claims are his claims, they're not my claims. You know what I mean? So just because like we're both traditionalists doesn't mean we have to agree on the same evidence and material. How he formulates his arguments is obviously it's up to him. I'm not here to defend his arguments. I'm here to defend my own.
Oh, that's fine. I just want to know what you think.
Yeah. Okay. So specifically about what issue, the stylometry of hadith, how it can be used to show if with any certainty if the hadith actually.
Yeah. So Yeah, didn't you make a video that it's kind of evidence in favor of the reliability of hadith corpus?
It's a data point in favor of the traditional attribution of hadith, that the hadith corpus, as Brown notes, is generally like correct, because we can note, for example, that the way the Prophet speaks is one type of way. The way that Abu Bakr speaks is one type of way. For example, it's more reserved. The way Umar speaks, for example, is more brash. The way Ali speaks is also like distinct from those other narrators. And for someone to have fabricated those distinct motives consistently throughout multiple hadith is unlikely. Therefore, the simplest explanation is simply that there is a core memory there that is actually authentic.
Yes, but that doesn't really entail that the content is going to be, because
I'm not claiming that the content of each hadith is correct because of stylometry. That's not my point.
No, because just a minute. That doesn't really the semantic content doesn't really have much to do with stylometry, right?
What do you mean?
Like when we're majority of stylometric studies are not like, they are non-semantic, they are structural, right? They are syntactic or structural, unless you're like doing
no, I accept that's syntactical. No, I accept this. Yeah, it's syntax. I agree.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, like how's that relevant then? Like how's this semantic, or like this kind of like noetic consistency with particular attributions of people, how's that related to stylometry?
Yeah, so that syntaxical, what we'd call voice, as I would call it, just a voice, that voice is consistent throughout multiple hadith. Single strand, multi-strand, whatever you want. I'm saying,
yeah, but that
voice to be consistent.
That voice is not a subject, usually not a subject of stylometry. Right? That's
not my point. I'm not claiming.
So it's an independent point.
Yeah. I'm not claiming there's a study that says this is the voice of Abu Bakr. Here are all the hadith that show it. It's not my claim. My claim is I'm looking at the hadith corpus. I'm reading it with my perspective. When I read the hadith of Abu Bakr where he's speaking, he's consistently speaking in a certain manner. When I look at the hadith attributed to the Prophet, he's speaking in a certain manner. Now, regardless of the individual authenticity of each hadith that says that, it could be weak. It doesn't make a difference. That core memory is there, where Abu Bakr is remembered as someone who's reserved, who speaks with wisdom. The Prophet likewise is someone who speaks with prophetic wisdom. He changes.
That's fine.
You agree with me? Yeah, that's fine. That's my point. I'm not claiming. I think maybe if you understood me to say,
I was just trying to understand.
The content is each.
That's fine. I was just trying to understand how's that relevant to stylometry.
Yes. Okay. So that's what I call the distinctive style of the speaker. So the Prophet speaks with a certain style. Abu Bakr speaks with a certain style. If you think you mean stylometry in the same sense as the Quran, where you're doing like C means clustering, that's not what I'm talking about.
Yes. So that's yes. So you're talking about like a general
same thing that Jonathan Brown says. Yeah, it's the same thing that Jonathan Brown says. He makes the same argument.
That's fine. But that kind of convergence is much weaker than. So here's the thing. Just in general, and I think any reasonable person would accept this claim. Just in general, it's easier to construct thematic or noetic or semantic convergence than it is to construct syntactic and lexical convergences. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. And we're talking about syntaxical convergence, correct?
Yeah, well, you aren't talking about syntactic. You're talking about noetic and thematic convergences.
Yeah, but that's the syntax. That's not the structure.
Well, syntax is the structure. So for example, let me give you an example. Let's go. Imagine you have two distinct authors, right? Mm-hmm. For two distinct authors, just a priori, it's easier to. It's more likely, relatively more likely, for two authors to construct texts that have thematic and noetic convergences in comparison to the case where two distinct authors produce texts that have a very consistent profile with regards to the structure and the syntax. So, for example, average verse length and average use of hapax legomena, and all the different feature sets that we use typically in stylometry. So you'd agree that it's actually much more difficult for two independent authors to have similarity on structure and syntactic levels.
If they had that similarity, then they'd just be copying, like very likely.
Yes. So that's what I'm saying. It's much more unlikely for two authors to independently develop a convergence on syntactic and structural features.
Yeah.
Relatively,
I agree.
It's relatively
this is like the synoptic.
more likely.
This is just the synoptic problem, basically. This is the same thing in Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
Yes. It's structurally, it's just more likely that two independent authors come up with the same thematic or noetic content, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would accept that. That's fine.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that when we are applying stylometry, we are usually not talking about the thematic and noetic convergences. We are talking about the structural, the structural feature sets. So actually there isn't enough. There isn't much at all in the Hadith corpus, be it Sunni Hadith corpus or the Shia Hadith corpus, in which someone has actually developed feature sets and applied a model that actually reliably traces single authorship and then applied to Hadith. That has just not happened. So I don't think there is a strong stylometric argument for the reliability of the Sunni Hadith corpus. The kind of stylometric argument that you are giving, which is just a much more weaker type of convergence, is like, they all spoke in a certain manner. But the thing is, that can be constructed just by an accurate memory of their personalities, which I think is generally preserved.
Well,
I think that's something.
Yeah, that's fine, but that's exactly what's the point of my argument. The point of the argument is not to authenticate the whole Sunni Hadith corpus. That's absurd. The point of the argument is to show that there is genuine memories in the Sunni Hadith corpus that is preserved.
Yes, but that's not something.
The core body of traditions is preserved, and this is something that's agreed on by all scholars.
That's amazing.
The disagreement is
so that's not something.
The disagreement is to what extent. That's what we're saying, right?
Yeah. So I don't have a problem with saying a type of
that's all it is.
Personality. I'm always interested. So that's another question. Why is it the case that then you are so dismissive? I don't know if you are, but generally people are so dismissive of the Shia Hadith corpus from the kind of argumentation we have been talking about. Because to me, a lot of these things
I can show you. If you want, I can show you.
I would be very interested.
So I believe
let me just
go ahead.
Let me just put my question. So, what features do you think are available in the Sunni Hadith corpus which are not available in the Shia Hadith corpus from a critical perspective?
So first of all, most of the Shia reports are weak according to Shia.
No, I'm not talking about the internal criticism.
I know, but this is still worth pointing out. It's still worth noting that classical Shia scholars consider most of their narrations to be weak. You may, that's fine if you think that that's irrelevant or whatever, but for the audience, I think that's a point worth noting. So, like I said, Al-Kafi, 70% of it is weak, and that's the most authentic, book of Shia. And when someone tried to compile Sahih Al-Kafi, I forgot who the scholar's name was, he actually got attacked and ostracized because they said, look, you're just going to expose us basically that we don't have any Sahih Hadiths. But anyway, to the point of you asked, for example, what do I think the Shi'i corpus lacks that the Sunni corpus has? Well, I think the Sunni corpus has early genuine memories that the Shi'i corpus doesn't have. Instead, the Shi'i corpus appropriates the early Sunni memories, twists them, and adds their own theological embellishments into them to suit their own narrative.
Yeah. So
I can give you examples if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I already understand what you're saying. So I'm not talking about our Shi'i memories related to the early Islamic history. I'm talking about attributions to Jafar as-Sadiq and al-Baqir.
Yeah. So in those attributions, I believe a lot
Because
of them are forged.
yeah, but the forgers could be Jafar and Bakr themselves. So that's really not an argument.
No.
against authenticity.
Unless you believe Ja'far as-Sadiq lived in like the 10th century, then I don't think you can say Ja'far as-Sadiq is the one who forged this hadith.
Oh, okay. So you're saying it's so unaction. Okay. Okay. So what kind of evidence is that going to be from like the primary works of Shia Hadith?
I believe I have the quote here, but if I could just find it, give me 1 second.
A lot of the content that you're saying, like thematic consistencies, I find the thematic consistencies in the Shia corpus as well. I'm not really convinced by, because I don't really
I
think
would disagree. I would disagree.
Okay.
There's a quote here. I have a lot of stuff. That's why it's sometimes the text is so small. I can't remember which one is it. But essentially, you read the book, right? You read Integrity of the Quran, where it essentially says. So he says here, based on the study of the reports attributed to Umar, the Quranic Codex was crystallized before the reign of Umar. This is the earliest dating of the Quranic Codex. Because the narratives about the stoning verse attributed to Umar also include the account of the succession of Abu Bakr, these reports became well known to the Shia communities in Iraq. Therefore, most probably the existence of such reports gave the idea of distortion of the Quran to sectarian Shi'is who were desperate to establish the presence of hard textual evidence for the succession of Imamah in the Quran. All right. He goes on to say that Shi'is followed suit to edit and combine some Sunni reports. They plagiarized the text of some Sunni reports and they forged new chains to attribute them to Imams as part of their identity building process. Therefore, it demonstrates that Isnad meta-analysis is not only an important tool for identifying hadith, but crucial for uncovering forgeries. And I'll find the actual passage where he says that this hadith is, forged in the name of Ja'far as-Sadiq. I can find it for you. But he says that, I believe, somewhere around page 200 from memory. Essentially, and he says here as well that it's forged as well. My point is that for us, I don't think we need to forge hadiths to like early authority. I know you would disagree. You would think that, I don't know if you accept the Shaktian position or what you believe, but from my perspective, we don't forge hadiths and back project it onto the Prophet in a way that wasn't caught out. I believe that every instance of that, the scholars caught out. Whereas I
don't believe that.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, we can talk about that. That's no issue. We can talk about that next time. There's no problem. And we can have a whole day like talking about that. Back projection is a big topic in and of itself. But essentially what I'm saying is that what the Sunni corpus has that the Shia corpus lacks is genuine attribution to the authoritative figures. So if you want to claim
but this passage that you cited, I don't see any evidence that, okay, why couldn't the fabricator be Ja'far?
Yeah, here, let me get you the passage. I'll explain to you why the fabricator couldn't be Ja'far.
Yeah. I've read Kara's work. It just appears that he has a bias in favor of Ja'far not being the disseminator of these reports somehow.
I mean, you could say that just because he agrees with me, he doesn't agree with you. That doesn't mean what he's saying is like it's forged and whatever.
No, I'm saying he doesn't present evidence for this claim.
He does present evidence.
Well, there are extensive reports with a lot of consistency attributing this idea to Ja'far. Why should we just presume that, well, I'm kind of using the same type of reasoning that you're using. Why should we just presume that, they are ahistorical back to Ja'far? Even if they are fabricated or eventually they don't go back to the Prophet, how does that entail that Ja'far didn't disseminate them?
Okay, so here, okay. So this is page 176. Let me get this up. I'll also turn on my screen. So this is Integrity of the Quran, page 176. He says, however, my findings up to this point increased my suspicion of forgery. Talking about the hadith that we were speaking about before. The main reason for my suspicion is that I have already dated Umar's report to slightly before the date of his death, the year 654. Therefore, I established that the earliest reports on the missing stoning verse originated from him. Taking this finding for granted, it is feasible to reach the assumption that some Shia Hadith collectors were aware of these reports and for obvious theological reasons decided to tamper with these reports by forging an entire new chain of narration
what's the evidence?
to attribute these reports.
What's the evidence for this? What's the evidence?
Yeah, he literally... Yeah, no.
Yeah, go ahead.
Through
Yeah, what's the evidence? This is just him claiming that.
I will get there. I'll get there. Be patient. Be patient. Yeah. Okay, so he's making the claim here that it's forged, right? Blah, 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 blah. All right, next one. Wait, no, not this one. Yeah, although these reports were in circulation in the first quarter of the 2nd century, Shia scholars did not pay much attention to them. No Shia scholar would miss these reports. Blah, 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 blah. Most Christians probably no. Okay, wait. Not this one either. Not this one either. Yeah. He says here, the study of textual evidence combined with the chain of transmission analysis has demonstrated that these variants can only be dated back to the 3rd or 9th century. Thus, they cannot be dated back to Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, who died in 765. So they can only be dated to the 9th century, which is like, what, 100 something years after Ja'far. There are multiple occasions for forgery, reductions, and merging. More importantly, there is an unmistakable similarity between the Sunni and Shia reports related to the missing stoning verse. It is almost certain that Shia reports were plagiarized versions of Sunni reports, similar to the report recorded in Abdul Razzaq as Musannaf that I quoted at the beginning of the
problem is the problem.
Just let me finish the quote, and you can respond.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Just finish. Yeah. It may be that the Shia report were based on Abdul Razzaq as he lived before the major Shia collectors who recorded these variants, or it may be that the sources were similar since Abdul Razzaq spent time in Iraq and collected reports there. Nevertheless, it is astonishing that no pre-modern Shia scholar made such a connection. They ignored the outstanding textual similarities between the Sunni and Shia reports and even used the Sunni concept of abrogation to explain the reports on the missing stoning verses. The only modern scholar who noticed the specific connotation is Al-Khuwi in his tafsir, and while he considers both chains sounds, he contends that Imam as-Sadiq must have practiced dissemination or taqiyya. In other words, he gave false religious opinions because of political persecution. He acknowledged that the idea originated from reports attributed to Umar and outrightly rejects the idea of missing stoning verses. Yet he falls short of considering that the Shia reports were deliberate forgeries that were plagiarized from Sunni reports. The dissemination theory is not workable in this case. However, as I've noted above, since there are deliberate forgery efforts with these reports, and most importantly, it is impossible to date them back to Ja'far as-Sadiq. And this is page 200.
What's the evidence? He's been claiming this. What's the evidence?
Yeah, he did.
Why can't Ja'far as-Sadiq be the plagiarizer?
Yeah, because it's
and by the way, this is a
the common link is
who's the common link? Who's the common link?
Yeah, I'll get a few.
And this is just one report. Like, how's this an argument against the reliability of the Shia Hadith corpus? Like, if you already agree that. So I think that's where the essential brother. I think this is where the essential problem is, that when presenting arguments in favor, right? You're like very positive and non-skeptical, just let me finish. You're very positive and in favor of the corpus and general reliability, but then you're making an argument against reliability just by using one tradition. Like there are multiple traditions.
I understand. I'm not saying that this by itself invalidates. No, I understand, but you're strong. Because I'm not saying that the whole tradition of Shia corpus is invalidated just because of this one report. But
because the thing is, at least with Ja'far as-Sadiq, you can actually reconstruct common links back to him, right? So, for example, there's I don't know if you read the paper.
Little makes the same point. He says that we can trace back to Ja'far as-Sadiq, and sometimes he's the common link.
Little actually.
I have no problem granting that.
Little actually traces.
I'm not saying
back
that
to Ja'far as-Sadiq.
Yeah, no worries. I have no issue granting that, and that's fine. You could understand that to be a point in favor of the reliability of like the Shi'i corpus, but I still don't think that's fully the case, because essentially you're just reconstructing his opinions, which are agreed on by both sides, which are not reconstructing his creedal views, which I think that's yet to be shown. But the point is like equivocal. I don't mind granting. The point here is that this report that's attributed to Ja'far as-Sadiq, he doesn't believe it's authentic. So
who's the common link? Yeah,
I'll get a few. So depends which cluster. I mean, so let me find a specific cluster. Yeah, wait here. So this is the textual analysis. Let me just start here. Yeah. Out of 14 variants attributed to Ja'far al-Sadiq, 3 have no chain of transmission. They're directly quoted by Sulaym bin Qais al-Hilli's Kitab, Ali and Ibrahim al-Qumi's Tafsir, and Al-Qadi Nu'man Da'im al-Islam. In addition, one of the variants recorded in Ahmad bin Muhammad Sayyid's Kitab al-Qira'at is a duplicate.
Duplicate of what?
Duplicate of the matan that he gave before. He gave a matan before. You've read this, right? Haven't you read this? You said you read this.
Well, this particular part, I don't think I read that one. I read the...
Okay, no worries. You can go back and read it. He says his full name is Muhammad, and then he basically goes through each cluster and he explains why he thinks it's problematic. So, for example, the person here, I'll just do one because I don't want to read the whole thing. You can obviously read it in your own time and see if what I'm saying is correct or not. But he just says here, for example, undoubtedly the book was authored by him and included the variant. However, certain changes or charges leveled against him may make it difficult to consider a genuine transmission process. Here, biographers have heavily criticized him for being an extremist who believed in metapsychosis.
How's that
or
relevant?
the transmigration.
Is he talking about a Sayyari?
No, just wait. He says it's actually irrelevant, but he actually goes on to say, like, this doesn't itself factor into the Islam analysis. Yeah. So he says the Imam reportedly wanted to prevent him from collecting religious taxes, blah, 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 blah. He says these accusations against Al-Sayyari make it problematic for the sake of the chain of transmission analysis, especially due to the charges of lying, fraud, and extremism. He seems to thus have a motive and precedent for backing this idea of distortion. Needless to say, these kinds of accusations on their own have no direct relevance to Isnad meta-analysis, which is what I was saying.
Yeah, that's amazing.
But they become useful when anomalies arise in the study of the chain and text. In such cases, we can use them as supporting arguments indicating potential motive for forgery or manipulation. And I would agree with him. And I would actually hold the same standard for the Sunni corpus as well. Nevertheless, there are other variants in the tradition, so it may be possible to verify whether Sayyari fabricated this report by examining the remaining variants in the next section. And that's what he does, and he shows that most likely they're not attributed to Ja'far al-Sadiq, because again, he says he dates them to the 9th century. And he says that it's not dated to Ja'far al-Sadiq, which is what I showed you before. So if you want, you can read the rest of it. He goes through the technical analysis. You said you haven't read it, so I'd advise you to read it. And then you can come back and we can discuss it later. I have no issue.
Sure, that's fine.
Okay, no worries. But
I don't think just mentioning. By the way, just saying, As-Sayyari is actually corroborated through some independent sources. So...
sources.
It's actually one of the cases where we have independent corroboration. Yeah. So I don't exactly remember the name of the source, but I can tell you the name. It's a Zaydi source. It's a Majmu'ah of Imam al-Hadi, if I'm remembering correctly. It's a Majmu'ah of Imam al-Hadi in the 12th century, where he is actually citing from al-Baraqi. So that's basically independent corroboration for As-Sayyari's reports, some of As-Sayyari's reports. And also, it being in Da'aim al-Islam almost certainly shows that As-Sayyari is not the fabricator. Because, well, have you read Al-Rajani on this, Kumail Rajani?
Yeah, I have read Al-Rajani and I know where you're going. I think that's a reasonable, counter argument, and I don't think As-Sayyari is necessarily the forger in the sense that the report, originates with him. I do think that there could be a gist of it that actually, that could be that goes to a step before him, for example, to Uthman bin Isa or to Abu Ayyub Abu Ayyub. I think it's possible that one of those disseminators actually did fabricate it as opposed to As-Sayyari, but I definitely don't believe As-Sayyari was 100% faithful in the transmission either.
Oh, okay, sure. But the thing is, this is just one report. So what's going to be
I understand. I'm not generalizing from this
argument.
I'm not generalizing.
Yeah. So
again, I want to be clear.
So what's going to be? Yeah, that's fine. So what's going to be the conclusive argument against the reliability of the Shia Hadith corpus? Particularly, I'm asking. So see, let me just make it clear what I want to ask about in particular. Two things, One is going to be the legal opinions transmitted on the authority of Ja'far al-Sadiq and al-Baqir. And those are going to be recorded in both the Talmud tradition and the Ismaili tradition.
I was just going to say, I don't have an issue granting that Shias can, in theory or hypothetically, or actually have preserved authentic, teachings of Ja'far al-Sadiq in terms of his fiqh. I just believe that's under, a big cascade of fabrications.
Well, what's the evidence for?
Well, I mean, I've given you one example now. I can give you more.
From a critical perspective, what's that? Well, one example, there are multiple examples like that in the Sunni corpus as well.
Yeah, I mean,
like Ibn Su has pointed like that. Just read Ibn Su's works. She provides multiple examples. The hadith of the 10 companions, the 10 promised paradise. Like, what's the problem with that? A lot of this stuff has been shown to be fabricated.
I mean, yeah, there's a difference between can't trace it back to the Prophet, like, or can't date it back to the Prophet, and actually fabricated. Like, those are two separate claims.
Well, you haven't proven the fabrication on the...
What do you mean by prove? I don't need to show you that.
Either.
Okay, well, I don't need to, like, when you say prove, what does that mean? Because when I say prove, I mean show, like, that it's more plausible than not that this is a fabrication, which I think I have. Whereas if you say prove, as in, like,
no, you have
with...
What?
Okay, the common link is dated to the, like, ninth tradition. Like,
no, why is it more plausible?
I believe this tradition
is more plausible.
Do you accept that the hadith attributed to Umar that has the same narrative gist is dated to Umar, according to Kara, or no?
Just a minute. Who's the common link in the...
There are many. So you can, for example, Hisham bin Salam is a common link.
So that in the particular tradition we were talking about, Hisham bin Salim is the common link?
Hisham bin Salim is a common link, yeah.
Oh, okay. Who's another one? So there are multiple common links.
Yeah,
there are multiple common links for the same tradition or the same family?
Wait, hold up. Let me correct myself. I think Hisham bin Salim is a partial common link, and I think Ja'far as-Sadiq himself is, like, I mean, I can just show you the diagram.
Sure.
Yeah, look.
Okay. If you show the...
So you have Hisham. You have Hisham bin
Salim. Well, Ja'far as-Sadiq, on a prima facie reading, Ja'far as-Sadiq appears to be the common link, if you're not taking Matan analysis into account. So that's a pretty clear case just on prima facie reading of Ja'far as-Sadiq being the common link. So why are you positing it's fabricated?
Yeah, because the attributions to him are all late.
How late? Just because the canonization process is late doesn't mean it's not going to...
120 to 150 years late.
Well, the same with majority, nearly all the hadiths. Well, the hadiths of
I don't want to do
prohibition of mut'ah, the hadiths of...
Wait. No, but this is too case. You're asking me for evidence, correct?
No. Sorry, no.
I'm telling you, there's a theological...
No. This is not a... No. Sorry. This is not a QK. The problem is you are not accepting that same standard when Ibn Su has written articles showing these hadiths are fabricated. You're saying, well, that's not evidence for fabrication.
I haven't read Ibn Su.
Oh, okay. That's fine. That's okay. So just because a hadith, even in your view, right, you don't hold to this principle that just because the canonization is like 100 years later, 150 years later, you're going to say, well, oh, it's a fabrication. Prima facie, actually, Ja'far as-Sadiq appears to be the common link.
Yeah, okay. So brethren, I'm not saying just because it's canonized later, therefore it's fabricated. This is one data point in an overall case, okay? Another data point is that so another data, I just quoted
the evidence that...
So when you say conclusive evidence...
That's the problem. I think see evidence. All you read, just a minute, all you read was criticism on Sayyari from from Shias. Like, how's that evidence for Ja'far as-Sadiq not being the common link? Yeah, I have not seen, you have not presented any evidence of Ja'far as-Sadiq not...
Okay. So when he says, like, 3 of the chains are solitary...
Actually, even Little accepts, like, 3 single strands, that's actually substantial evidence. If 3 single strands have, like, distinct recensions, that's
Sorry, my bad.
Not bad evidence, that's actually good.
I meant to say 3 have no chains of transmission.
Okay, and how many of them are in total?
14 variants.
Okay, so from 14.3, okay, you have 11 variants left. So what's the problem with these 11 variants, and why is Ja'far as-Sadiq not the common link?
Okay, cool. So for these 11 variants, I mean, we can... So the Sayyari one, we've gone through it. Al-Baqri received his variant from Uthman bin Isa, a controversial figure among Twelvers. He was known to be a representative of Imam Qazim in Kufa and was held in high esteem. He received his blah, 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 blah. He refused to accept Imam Rida's succession, blah, blah, blah. How about the second chain represents the exact text? Thus, it's possible that Al-Baqir received blah, 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 blah. The variants of this report emerged in Medina, where Ja'far al-Sadiq was a relative transmitted in Kufa through Qom. It is difficult to ascertain the origins of the text ascribed to Ja'far al-Sadiq. However, I can only attempt to recover his report in the text analysis.
What is he saying?
Yeah, he's saying at this preliminary stage, you can't identify. Yeah, at this preliminary stage, he can't see if it's ascribed to Ja'far. He goes on to examine the next chains. We can go through it right now. I mean, I kind of wanted to go now, but I mean, I can go through it if you want.
Yeah, I mean, if you're making an argument, that's fine. But the thing is, if you're making an argument, at least as of now, I can go and read it. As of now, you have not presented me any argument for why this particular narration, which, by the way, you wanted to show is fabricated, why this doesn't go back to Ja'far al-Sadiq. If I were to trust your epistemology, which is just like, just a minute, but your epistemology is you are actually pretty positive about, prima facie reading of common links, right? And you're pretty positive about it. So, like, why should, if I'm to apply your standard, why shouldn't I just accept the attribution to Ja'far al-Sadiq? I have no problem with you being critical, actually.
So I'm being very consistent here. If there was a report that has a common link attributed to, like the prophet is unknown, I will get rid of that strand and I'll X it out. The same way the Muhaddithin did. The way the Muhaddithin, if you go to the Kutab of Mawadiyah, the reason they would reject a report is because they would problematize the narrator. So when I problematize, like for example, this fourth chain of transmission is in As-Sayyar's Kitab al-Qira'at. Al-Layli is an unknown person. I would get rid of that chain. I would not take it as reliable. Would you take this chain to be reliable if it has an unknown trading in it?
No. Yes, I can actually, because in my methodology.
So it's reliable? You're saying it's reliable?
Actually, we just a minute. Just a minute. Let me finish. We can actually even do an analysis of single strands where there's an unreliable or even unknown trader, because you have the matan, and the matan can tell you whether it's contingent upon another subrecension or it's a peculiar subrecension of its own. So actually, even if there is some majhul in the chain, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm gonna just not take that matan into account or that attribution into.
Okay, if all the chains are majhul, would you take that report?
So are you saying that there are no chains, or the chains have some majahil in them? Because even if all the chains have like some majahil in them.
I'm saying in theory, let's say.
No, even in yes, I'm asked. Yeah. Even in theory, if I have like 10 chains and each of them have a majhul person in them, but they all have attributions, right? You can still do an ikma, actually. That can still be a subject to ikma. It doesn't necessarily preclude it from being historical. Just because there are 10 majahil, there's one majhul person in each chain.
Okay, so for example, in another chain, this is the sixth chain of transmission. So chain 5 and 4 have majhul people in them. Chain 6 is from Kulaini, and Kulaini couldn't have received this very directly from Yunus because he's. Wait, hold up 1 second. If there was a gap between two traders and they couldn't have met, would you still take that hadith to be authentic?
You can still study it actually, and you can still analyze it. Yes, that's possible. Again,
bro, come on, man. Bro, you're stretching it, bro. So okay. So 3 chains. Hold up. So listen.
No. I think you're not understanding.
Wait, come on. I'll let you speak. Let me speak. But come on. I'll let you speak. Let me speak. 3 variants are unknown. Like there's no chain at all. No chain given. 3 have people who are majhul. 2 have people that are majhul. The 6th one has a gap between 2 of the trade-ins. That means they could not have met. In the 7th one, it says that the author is a contemporary of a Sayyar, blah, 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 and he was not taught by the person, the editor of the book, blah, 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 who was a possible student of Qummi, and he remains unknown. So there's very little information about him, and the person is also majhul. 7th one is also majhul. The 8th one, Saduq is known, he's one of the greatest, blah, 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 blah. I've noted here, Hisham bin Salam transmits the same variant and received it from Ja'far. The apparent issue with this chain is the time gap between Saduq and Ibn Hisham. So again, there's another time gap here. So it appears that all these chains, I mean, I can keep going through it, but they're either maqtu', they either have no chain, or if they do give a chain, there's a considerable gap between some of the trade-ins. All of these chains are weak. These are all weak chains, converging on a single person.
Relevant. That's irrelevant.
It's not irrelevant, bro. I consider that to be very relevant.
It is irrelevant.
How is it irrelevant?
I'm telling you why it's irrelevant.
Yeah,
let me Okay, let me finish.
Of course. I want you to speak.
So yes, do you understand? Yeah, do you understand what isnad ka matan analysis is? Because if you do, then you're like yourself know why it's actually relevant.
I understand what isnad ka matan analysis is, and
so what's ikma? What's ikma?
Yeah, if you could let me explain, I'll tell you. So actually, I could just go back up to the book, and he actually explains what isnad ka matan analysis is. Like right at the beginning, he describes Howard Motzky's theory, and then he gives his own version of it, where he describes the correlation between the different tradents and the chains, and he looks between them to test if there's genuine correlation, reconstructing the text, and then finding the antiquium, the cumulus antiquium, correct?
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So when he's doing that here...
So let me tell you, just a minute. So that's the reason you can actually... This is so... I mean, I don't know why you don't know this already. You can have a partial common link, and the partial... for example, you could have a partial common link, right? And Qadi Nu'man is transmitting from that partial common link from, he's just saying, fi kitabi, let me give you an actual example. Fi kitab al-Halabi, right? Fil kitab Ismail bin Ja'far, right? I actually don't need the chain necessarily from between Qadi Nu'man and the attribution for me to know whether the underlying recension corresponds with the partial common link or not. All I need is actually the attribution and the text, right? And then I can study the different texts and see if they're in line with being part of the or of a partial common link or not. So it actually doesn't matter if there's a majhul person.
You don't need this not. You don't need this not.
You don't necessarily need the full isnad.
Okay, cool.
You can actually reconstruct the urs. Even on partial attributions.
I agree, and that's true. Point here is you can't reconstruct it if there's no way the people could have met. If there's a gap between Bukhari and, for example,
that's
Imam
not true.
Malik,
that's just false.
If there's a 70-year gap between Bukhari and Imam Malik, and there's no way they met, then there's no way you could do isnad and matan analysis on that chain. The chain is majhul. You can look at the text and compare and see if there's a common... One second.
Whoa.
You could do... One second. Can I speak? I'll let you speak. Did I interrupt you? Please. So you could do what's called textual form criticism, where you could look at the matan and you could look at the variation in matan, and you could try and reconstruct the common, kernels in the distinctive matan tradition and reconstruct it that way. But that is not isnad called matan analysis. That's just source criticism. Those are two separate things, which you're confusing.
No, that's actually... that is one of the core principles of isnad ka matan analysis.
I understand, but
isnad ka matan analysis is nothing other than it is nothing other than comparative source criticism. It is the comparative for shunk. Yeah, so let me finish, please. Let me finish, man. Let me finish.
Go ahead.
So even in the Bukhari example that you gave, right? Just by reading the text of Bukhari, you can actually analyze whether even if it's a broken chain on the lower end, even then you can analyze and see whether Bukhari is preserving an older recension or not. All you need is, for example, you have Malik's tradition. You just need multiple other chains back to Malik, right? And then you can say, well, it's entirely consistent. What Bukhari is citing is actually entirely consistent with Malik's ur. So this is in fact an actual transmission from Malik, even if we don't know who the authority of Bukhari is. So just because one particular authority remains unknown, that's really not going to affect the reconstruction of the tradition. So what's the problem? What you're claiming? No, just a minute. Please let me finish. What the argument you are making against the reliability of this tradition is just presupposing your like a Rijali framework of dating hadith, right? Like what's the evidence? What's the evidence going to be for that?
Okay, is Kara using my Rijali framework?
Well, so far as you've read, that's what it's sounding like. I haven't seen any argument for this.
Kara is not a traditional Sunni. Bro, come on, please. Kara is not a traditional Sunni. He does not presuppose my Rijali framework. Kara is a secular critical scholar. when he says
no, he's sounding to me. He's sounding to me like a traditionalist Shia. No, he's not sounding to me like a traditionalist Sunni. He's sounding to me like a traditionalist Shia, and I think he's actually Shia. So, well,
he's Shia, yeah.
You know, there can be a conflict of interest. Yeah, so there can be a conflict of interest. He's using talking points, polemical talking points that I would expect a traditionalist Shia to use. This is not an argument.
Okay.
Like, you need to show me an actual argument against the...
Okay. I'm not going to keep going around in circles. I appreciate the disagreement, but I think it's pretty clear that the Qara doesn't grant this hadith to be authentically attributed to Ja'far. He dated to the 9th century. If you want to dispute Qara's findings and say that there's conflict of interest or whatever, then I suggest you publish your own peer-reviewed studies and you correct Qara, and I'll be the first to buy that article and read it myself. Until then, what I'm going to do is read the rest of the variants and why they're weak, according to Qara. And then, if you want, I can send you the book on Discord. If you have Discord, I can send it to you. Or it's online, you can find it.
I have the book.
Okay, no worries. So I'll just read that and then we can wrap up, because we've been going for quite a bit, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, and I would very appreciate if you could actually engage with Ivan Su. I would love to read your article.
Send me her stuff. Yeah, okay. No worries. I'll look into it, inshallah. Okay, so for I think this was the 10th chain. He says there's a gap of 1 generation between tradents, so they didn't hear it, and the most you can date it to is the 9th century. The next variant, the 12th chain, the 11th chain is like the same thing. The 12th chain is transmitted by Abdullah bin Sinan, who died around the mid-8th century, but Tusi died 460. Thus, there's a 3 centuries gap between the two. Therefore, he did not receive it from Abdullah bin Sinan and must have received it from one of the books he decided not to mention. Again, huge gap. And then the last variant was recorded by Nu'man bin Muhammad, known as Da'man al-Islam. He's one of the great Ismaili jurists. Considers he did not cite any chain for this variant, therefore it's impossible to study it. So again, this is matured. So again, with each chain there's problems. If you want to say that despite the fact that the chains are either not given, when they are given there is huge gaps, like 3 centuries or 1 generation or 2 generations, gaps between specific tradents, or there's other problems with the chain, like accusations of forgery or whatever. If you think all of that's irrelevant and you think it's still plausibly attributed to Ja'far as-Sadiq, you're more than welcome to have that position. I don't think that position is convincing. I'll let you wrap up. So if you want to repeat, have a little closing statement, that's fine. And inshallah, we'll end the live here.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, it's pretty clear that Qara is not engaging with the point. I gave you a very simple example of how actually words can be reconstructed, even if the lower part of the chain is not available. And Qara actually needs to show that these partial common links do not have a reliable or, and he has not done that. Like whatever you have read so far, nothing of that is actually arguing against is whether there is an underlying or text or not. So that's just going to be the prima facie problem with what he's doing. He's basically just using, since there's no lower part of the chain, we can't really trace it back. That's just simply not true. Just because there's no lower part doesn't mean you can't reconstruct that word. Yeah, sure. And you said right on it. Okay, no problem. I mean, actually, there are people who have written on it already. Even Little, I think he's written on this. But yeah, okay, that's fine. I think we had a good discussion.
No worries. I'll just
continue later.
Yeah, so I'll just take 2 minutes to respond to what you said, and then I'll just end the live. So when you say like the text can't be can still be reconstructed, I agree with you. I just don't think that attribution is correct, because I believe the original text actually goes back to Umar, and it's dated originally to Umar, and Shi'is are changing the report of Umar and embellishing it and changing it for their own theological views, because they have the motive to do that. That's Qara's argument, that the originally actually is reconstructed to Umar, and then it's passed down in Kufa, and that's where it's picked up by Shi'is, and that's where they later mix and match these reports, these Sunni reports, fabricate these chains and attribute them to their Shi'i imams. But those attributions are incorrect, even if the text is actually authentic. So that's, I think you maybe haven't completely understood Qara's point, but that's fine. We can talk about it next time, inshallah, and you're more than welcome to come back on and we can continue to discuss. And again, I'll look into the stuff you sent me about Sue, the person you told me about, and I'll look into their arguments, and inshallah we can continue to discuss about that. And then I think, was there something else you said, brethren? What was the last thing you mentioned? I believe I'm forgetting.
This is even if this is fabricated.
Right.
Really conclusive evidence.
Yeah, I would agree with you. So even if this particular report is fabricated, that isn't like conclusive evidence that disproves the whole Shia corpus. Obviously, it doesn't follow. But the point is, the whole reason I brought this example is because if you remember, you asked me, can you show me an example of what you're talking about, of what the Shia corpus doesn't have that the Sunni corpus does have? And I would show that this is an example where we didn't take your traditions, mix them and match them, and embellish them theologically, and then back project them to reliable traditions. That's not something that happened in the Sunni corpus. But yeah, I'm happy to end the conversation here, and I appreciate you for coming on and being respectful and cordial, even if we disagree. That's fine. I think civil debate is very important, and there's no issue here. So yeah, anything else you want to say?
No, that's fine. Thank you very much.
حتى سما واستطال ودور الأمجاد طالما تولى ما تولى باطلا نفس ومالا طار إليك شهابا يلهي بالأرض اشتعالا في غبار الحرب يبدو مثل بدر يتنالى